6 of The Chosen throws us directly into the final hours of Jesus' life, and from the very first episode, we are confronted with the unbearable tension of betrayal and judgment. The Gospels tell us that after the Last Supper, after the prayers in Gethsemane, Jesus was arrested in the dark of night, betrayed with a kiss. And now, the season picks up at the very moment when he is dragged into the hands of those desperate to silence him. The trial of Jesus is not one trial, but a series of humiliations, interrogations, and condemnations. First, he is taken before Annas, the former high priest who still holds influence in the temple courts. Annas questions Jesus, trying to corner him into admitting something dangerous, but Jesus simply responds that he has spoken openly, that nothing has been hidden. The irony of this moment is devastating. The man who healed in broad daylight, who preached on hillsides and in synagogues, is now treated like a criminal who has plotted in secret. When one of the guards strikes him across the face, the silence of that slap echoes louder than any words could. And this is just the beginning. From Annas, Jesus is pushed toward Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin. The religious leaders gather in haste, desperate to find a charge that will stick. Witness after witness steps forward, but their stories do not align. Their testimonies contradict each other. It is chaos, confusion, and desperation disguised as justice. Finally, Caiaphas demands Jesus to declare if he is the Messiah. And in that moment, Jesus speaks words that seal his fate. He declares that the Son of Man will be seen at the right hand of the Mighty One, coming on the clouds of heaven. For the Sanhedrin, this is blasphemy. For the disciples, it is the truth they already knew but could hardly comprehend. Caiaphas tears his robes, a sign of outrage, and in that act the council condemns Jesus to death. But here lies the problem. They do not have the power to carry out an execution. For that, they need Rome. And so Jesus is dragged to Pilate, the Roman governor, a man caught between politics and conscience. Pilate examines Jesus and finds no fault in him. The crowd stirs outside, manipulated by the chief priests demanding death. Pilate asks Jesus directly, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus answers with the most haunting words, "You say that I am." Pilate hesitates, unsettled, knowing the man before him is no criminal. But instead of releasing him, Pilate sends Jesus to Herod Antipas, passing responsibility like a burden he cannot carry. Herod, eager to see a miracle, mocks him when Jesus refuses to speak. They dress him in a royal robe, mocking his kingship, before sending him back to Pilate. Every step is humiliation, every moment a step closer to the cross. Pilate finds himself cornered. The pressure from the crowd is deafening. The leaders stir the people into a frenzy. He offers them a choice: release Jesus or release Barabbas, a violent criminal. The people shout for Barabbas. It is one of the most tragic choices in history. The guilty goes free while the innocent is condemned. Pilate washes his hands in front of them all, but no water can cleanse the stain of this decision. He hands Jesus over to be flogged and crucified. Roman soldiers twist a crown of thorns and press it into his head. They mock him, spit on him, and hail him as king in cruelty. The darkness deepens, not just in the night sky, but in the hearts of those demanding blood. This first section of Season 6 is heavy beyond words. Dallas Jenkins has revealed that nearly the entire season is filmed at night, mirroring the darkness that surrounded these events in Scripture. Betrayal happened in darkness. Denial happened in darkness. The trial itself was covered in shadows, both literal and spiritual. That choice to film overnight adds a chilling authenticity that makes this story not just retold, but relived. Every scene is loaded with weight, with symbolism, with the suffocating reality of what is coming. For the cast, this has been the most demanding season ever. Jonathan Roumie, who embodies Jesus, has spoken about how carrying the role through these final hours has been the most painful, exhausting, yet meaningful work of his career. Elizabeth Tabish, who plays Mary Magdalene, described it as heartbreaking to even stand in the presence of what was being reenacted. And Abe Bueno-Halad, who plays Big James, admitted that the atmosphere on set was unlike anything before, solemn, focused, charged with something beyond acting. What makes this even more powerful is the knowledge that this is just the beginning. Episode 1 of Season 6 is not the climax. It is the foundation. The trial, the accusations, the betrayal, and the silence of Jesus all prepare us for the unbearable reality of the crucifixion. This season is not rushing, it is slowing down, making us feel the weight of every moment, every decision, every word, and every silence. And by the end of it, when the cross finally stands against the sky, we will not just have watched it happen. We will have lived through the night that changed the world forever. As Season 6 unfolds beyond the opening trial, the story plunges us even deeper into the unbearable weight of betrayal and denial. What makes this chapter of The Chosen so powerful is not just what happens to Jesus, but what happens to those around him. The disciples, who had sworn their loyalty, find themselves shaken, confused, and terrified. Peter, the rock upon which Jesus promised to build his church, is suddenly exposed in a way that cuts to the core of the human heart. The Gospels tell us that after Jesus was taken away, Peter followed at a distance, watching, waiting. But when pressed about whether he knew Jesus, he denied it 3 times. The rooster crowed, and Peter wept bitterly. This moment has haunted Christians for centuries because it shows us the frailty of even the strongest among us. And Season 6 does not shy away from it. It makes us feel the fear, the guilt, and the overwhelming sorrow that comes when the truth of weakness is laid bare. In that courtyard, under the cover of night, Peter realizes that love and fear cannot coexist, and he chooses fear. His tears, though, are not the end. They are the beginning of a redemption arc that will shake the world. But Peter is not alone in his failure. Judas is already lost to betrayal, his silver coins burning in his hands like a curse. He has done what he set out to do, leading the guards to Jesus in the garden, but now he realizes the full weight of his choice. Judas is the tragic reminder of what happens when greed and despair blind the soul. The tension in Season 6 is not only about what is happening to Jesus, but also about what is happening inside the hearts of those who loved him and those who hated him. The Sanhedrin, fueled by pride and fear of losing control, believe they are saving their people by condemning him. Pilate, caught in political games, believes he is keeping peace by giving in to the mob. And the disciples, scattered and frightened, believe they are saving their own lives by hiding. Yet in all of this, the only one who remains unshaken is Jesus himself. He chooses silence over defense, dignity over retaliation, sacrifice over escape. That contrast is the very heartbeat of Season 6. The weight of the crucifixion begins long before the nails are hammered. It begins in the beatings, the mocking, the rejection, and the loneliness. Roman flogging was not just punishment, it was designed to break a man before death. Stripped and tied to a post, Jesus was whipped with leather cords embedded with bone and metal, tearing his flesh with every strike. The soldiers laughed, jeered, and mocked him as though this was sport. They pressed a crown of thorns into his head, each thorn piercing deep into his skin, and draped a purple robe on him in cruel imitation of royalty. "Hail, King of the Jews!" they shouted as they struck him. For the audience watching The Chosen, this is not just history. It is horror. It is humanity at its ugliest, mocking the very one who came to save them. Dallas Jenkins has said this season demanded everything from the cast and crew, and you can already see why. These are not scenes you act through lightly. They demand heart, vulnerability, and a willingness to step into the darkest night of history. At the same time, Season 6 is carefully building towards something even bigger. This is not simply tragedy, it is prophecy fulfilled. Every insult, every wound, every act of cruelty was foretold in Scripture centuries before. Isaiah spoke of the suffering servant who would be pierced for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities, and by his wounds we would be healed. Psalm 22 describes the mocking voices, the casting of lots for his clothes, and the feeling of abandonment. These words are no longer just verses read in church. They are being brought to life in front of us, step by step, hour by hour. And for viewers, this makes the weight of the crucifixion even heavier, because it reminds us that none of this was an accident. Every moment was part of a divine plan that had been set into motion long before this night. Behind the cameras, the toll of filming these moments has been immense. Jonathan Roumie spoke openly about how difficult it was to portray Jesus at this stage of the story. He lost weight, endured physically demanding scenes, and carried the emotional burden of embodying Christ's suffering. Elizabeth Tabish described how painful it was to watch, even as an actress playing Mary Magdalene, because in that moment, it no longer felt like acting. For her, it was watching someone she loved go through torment. Abe Bueno-Khaled mentioned how the set felt different, like the cast and crew knew they were walking on sacred ground. They were not just making a show, they were reliving the most sacred, painful, and transformative hours in history. The darkness on screen seeped into the atmosphere around them, leaving everyone changed. And what makes this section of the story truly gripping is how relentless it feels. There is no pause, no relief, no turning back. Once Jesus is condemned, the machinery of death moves forward with chilling inevitability. The crowd, stirred into madness, demands crucifixion again and again. Pilate, torn between justice and politics, finally gives in. The soldiers do their work with cruel efficiency. And through it all, Jesus does not resist. He embraces the silence, the suffering, and the shame because he knows what the end of this path holds. This is where The Chosen separates itself from other portrayals. It refuses to let us look away. It forces us to walk through every step of the night, to feel the crushing weight of humanity's rejection, and to see the love of Christ shining even through the silence of his suffering. Season 6 is making it clear. This is not just a show. It is an encounter. By slowing down and devoting an entire season to this one night, Dallas Jenkins is giving us no escape from the reality of what happened. We cannot skip ahead to the resurrection. We cannot soften the blow. We are forced to sit in the trial, to hear the shouts of "Crucify him," to see the crown pressed into his head, and to feel the dread that hangs over the disciples as they watch their teacher dragged toward death. And in that dread lies the heart of the gospel, that this darkness is not the end, but the doorway to the greatest light the world has ever seen. As the trial of Jesus drags on, the darkness around him thickens, not only in the eyes of the Sanhedrin or Pilate, but also in the hearts of his closest followers who are now gripped by fear, doubt, and despair. Peter, the one who swore he would die before denying his master, now trembles in the courtyard, his faith crumbling under the weight of pressure and fear. The sound of a rooster crowing will soon echo like a thunderclap through his soul, shattering his confidence and leaving him broken. Judas, who has already sold his teacher for silver, begins to feel the unbearable weight of guilt pressing down on him, a torment that no coin can silence. The disciples scatter, hiding in the shadows of Jerusalem, too afraid to stand, too powerless to fight. Their Messiah, whom they believed would bring freedom, stands silent in chains, beaten and mocked, while the crowd begins to chant louder and louder for his death. The high priests push Pilate into a corner, and the governor, fearing rebellion and losing his power, washes his hands as though water could cleanse the blood of innocents. In this moment, the world teeters on the edge of unspeakable tragedy, and heaven itself seems to hold its breath. The crowd, stirred by manipulation and fear, chooses Barabbas, a murderer, over the one who healed the sick, fed the hungry, and raised the dead. And yet, through all of this cruelty, betrayal, and injustice, Jesus does not resist. His silence screams louder than words. His submission speaks deeper than any argument. This is not defeat. It is destiny unfolding, a plan greater than any man can comprehend. Every step of humiliation, every whip, every shout of hatred is part of a story that will not end here. But the disciples cannot see it. They only see their teacher dragged away, a crown of thorns pressed into his head, blood staining the streets of Jerusalem. They do not yet know that what looks like the darkest day in history will become the very light that changes the world forever. The road to Golgotha is not just a path of suffering. It is a stage upon which the fate of humanity is being written in real time. As Jesus carries the heavy wooden cross through the streets of Jerusalem, the air is filled with a mixture of chaos, sorrow, and cruelty. The soldiers mock him, striking him with whips and spitting in his face, treating the very Son of God as less than human. The crowd, many of whom once cheered his miracles and followed him with hope, now shout for his death, their voices rising like a storm, drowning out reason, mercy, and truth. Some turn away in shame, unable to look at the man who once opened blind eyes, now stumbling beneath the crushing weight of the cross. Others watch in silence, hearts torn between fear and faith, wondering how the one who calmed storms now bleeds in the dust. The disciples are nowhere to be found, except for John, who follows at a distance with Mary, the mother of Jesus, her heart pierced with grief, deeper than any sword could inflict. Every step is agony, every stumble a reminder that this is not just pain, it is sacrifice. The Roman guards force a man, Simon of Cyrene, to help carry the cross when Jesus collapses, his body too broken to rise on its own. Yet even in his suffering, his eyes lock on the people around him, not with hatred, but with a compassion that defies understanding. He speaks to the women weeping on the roadside, telling them not to mourn for him, but for themselves and for their children, as though even now his concern is not for his own life, but for the future of those who will live through the turmoil to come. As they reach the hill, the soldiers waste no time. They stretch his arms across the wood, driving nails into his hands and feet, each strike echoing with the weight of humanity's sins. The cross is lifted high, and there he hangs, suspended between heaven and earth, mocked by some, pitied by others, yet fulfilling a destiny set long before the world began. Around him, the scene unfolds with heartbreaking detail. Soldiers gamble for his clothes, dividing his garments as though his suffering were nothing more than a game. The chief priests stand with smug satisfaction, certain they have silenced the threat to their power, and passers-by sneer, shouting, "If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." Even one of the criminals crucified beside him mocks him, demanding proof of his power. But the other thief, in a moment of raw honesty and desperate faith, turns to Jesus and asks to be remembered when he comes into his kingdom. And Jesus, through his agony, speaks words that still shake the world. "Today you will be with me in paradise." In this moment, even while dying, he extends grace, mercy, and eternal hope. The hours drag on as darkness begins to cover the land, a darkness not of night, but of judgment, grief, and the weight of creation itself mourning its creator. The earth trembles, and the heavens grow silent, as though all of existence is waiting for what will happen next. At the foot of the cross, Mary weeps, held by John, her heart shattering as she watches her son gasping for breath. Jesus, with his fading strength, looks down at her and entrusts her into John's care, proving once again that even in his final moments, love defines every word, every action. The Roman centurion who oversees the execution begins to sense something he cannot explain, something far greater than any crucifixion he has ever witnessed. The ground shakes, the sky darkens, and the veil between heaven and earth grows thin. This is not just another execution, it is the collision of justice, mercy, and prophecy in one final act. And yet, as Jesus cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" The pain of separation from the Father pierces deeper than the nails in his hands. This cry is not weakness. It is the weight of sin, the burden of every failure, every betrayal, every moment of human darkness being carried on his shoulders. The cross is no longer just wood and nails. It has become the altar upon which the greatest sacrifice in history is being made. And while those around him may think this is the end, heaven knows it is only the beginning of something that will shatter death, conquer sin, and rewrite the destiny of mankind. The final moments on the cross are unlike anything the world has ever seen. The sky above Jerusalem grows darker still, as if creation itself mourns the suffering of its maker. The mocking voices begin to fade, replaced by an eerie silence broken only by the labored breaths of the crucified. Each gasp is a battle, each word a struggle, yet even in his agony, Jesus speaks words that no one can forget. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Forgiveness, offered not to the worthy, not to the faithful, but to the very ones who nailed him to the wood. It is a love so radical, so incomprehensible, that even hardened soldiers pause in disbelief. Hours pass, and the weight of the world presses down heavier and heavier. The temple priests believe they have won. Pilate believes he has preserved peace. The crowd believes justice has been served. But heaven knows otherwise. Heaven knows that this is the hour where prophecy collides with reality, where sacrifice breaks the chains of sin forever,